Welcome, everyone, to Homeless in San Diego. My name is Greg Angel. I serve as our host, and I also get to serve as the CEO at Interfaith Community Services, which is where we're located today. And our guest today is Mr. Jason Ritchie. Jason, welcome on the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
So, Jason, we met at Escondido City Hall last month. You were there for the council. There was a council meeting. And so how did you get into advocacy work?
It's become a passion of mine. I'm formerly unhoused myself, and I have family and friends that are still currently unhoused. So my biological father is unhoused. My uncle's currently unhoused. I went through homelessness myself as a child with my family, and then again as an adult alone.
What was that experience like for you?
As a child, it wasn't really that bad to me because my family was good at making it feel like an adventure. So we spent a summer in a campground. My father's company went bankrupt. Ironically, the city of San Diego passed a no-growth ordinance, which means no building housing. So my dad was in construction, and he built apartment complexes, single-family homes, and retirement centers. So when the city of San Diego passed the no-growth ordinance, the properties that he had invested in, his company had invested in, pretty much became worthless because you couldn't build on them. So his company went bankrupt, and it caused our family to have to sell the home we were living in and move. So we moved north, we moved to Oregon, and then eventually to Washington State. And we spent the summer on a campground, and I had fun just playing in the river and, being a kid. But
how old were you?
I'm sure it was very stressful for my parents.
I can only imagine. How old were you then?
I was 12 years old.
Okay. Did you have any siblings?
Yes, 4 siblings.
Wow. It's a big family to be in that situation.
Yeah, yes.
So you spent that summer at the campground. What happened from there with you and your family?
Well, my dad's always been a hard worker, and my mom was a stay-at-home mother with the 5 kids, but she had to get a job as well. And so they worked their way out of it, and we found housing and got us in school, and
Were you in the Northwest then, or?
Yes.
Yeah. And did you eventually come back to San Diego?
Yes. I was 17 or 18 when I came back, and I stayed with a friend of the family. He was a pastor, and I got caught smoking weed, and I was working for him as well. So
yeah,
I got kicked out and fired on the same day, basically.
Lost your job and your home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then
at age like
18. 18, yes.
Here in San Diego.
Right. And so that kind of put me on the street. I had a van, and so I was living in my van, and that's kind of where I turned to crime. I was hanging around the wrong people that were running the streets and committing crime, and that stress and not knowing how to take care of myself. I was still really young, and I didn't even know what I wanted really, or how to get it. And so I turned to crime, and I ended up going to prison for 17 years.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Oh man, that was horrible.
Where were you in prison?
In California. I got bounced around
to
like six prisons or so.
Yeah.
There's a lot of change going on in prison right now, and it's becoming more about rehabilitation. And I saw that in about the last 5 years of my sentence.
Yeah.
They're bringing in more education, correspondence courses, actually bringing professors into the colleges or into the prisons now.
That's good.
Which is great to see.
Yeah.
I'm a huge proponent for education over incarceration.
How old were you when you went to prison?
18 or
You were
19, excuse me.
19, and then you spent the next 17 years
Yes.
in prison, half your life.
Yes. I got out when I was 37.
And how long ago was that?
That was 7 years ago.
Wow. So you spend half your life in jail, and you get out. What was your headspace like at that point? What were you thinking as you get your freedom back?
Yeah, I got out and I was on fire. I spent all that time just waiting to get out. And honestly, I didn't even believe that it was possible that I was going to get out, because I was in the highest level prisons there, and not everybody makes it out.
Yeah.
I was lucky enough not to have a life sentence, so I still held on to some hope. And I did the best I could to survive and educate myself while I was in there. I learned about a project called Project Rebound,
Mm-hmm.
a program called Project Rebound that advocates to educate the formerly incarcerated into higher education.
Mm-hmm.
And the year I got out, it was coming to San Diego State. And so the week I got out, I went straight to them and said, I need to get in your program. And
To Project Rebound at San Diego State?
Project Rebound at San Diego State. Yeah, so I was part of the first cohort there. There was 8 of us. And yeah, I did well. I graduated in 2020. So
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What did you graduate in? What did you study?
I got an interdisciplinary degree in film, journalism, and art.
Which leads to some of the work that you're doing now, and we're gonna our listeners are gonna get to learn more about that and get some opportunities to see that art. Your journey is one that I'm sure most of our listeners can only imagine, spending half their life in jail and what led to that conviction and what that experience was like, and that being on fire as you leave. Is there, what else about that experience do you think is important to be able to share with our listeners who are here with you, like they're listening and they want to better understand?
Yes, well, I believe it ties in with homelessness.
Okay.
So I believe it was in large part due to my circumstances that I was born into and raised with, so my low socioeconomic status, my family that didn't put a priority on education, and yes, so I believe that we are all a product of our circumstances, of our environments, and that's not necessarily fair, right? Like, we don't get to choose the family we're born into, the city we're born into.
Yeah.
So keeping that in mind, I think it's important to take that into consideration when analyzing people, judging people, that not everybody has the same opportunities. And I still recognize that I've been born into a lot of privilege. Just being born into America is privilege. Those circumstances led me to becoming homeless. And it wasn't through necessarily any fault of my own, especially being a child, So I think that there's a lot of prejudgment about people that go into incarceration and people on the street, and that it's not necessarily warranted, because a lot of people just assume that that's what they want and that's what they deserve.
What if someone listens to this, or somebody who maybe is not listening to this podcast says, well, the crime that you committed, and I don't know what the incident was, well, that was you did that. You shouldn't have done that, and it's your own fault. How would you engage somebody who has that perspective?
Yes, well, I do understand that perspective as well, and I take full responsibility for my crime. And I think that's how it is necessary to look at it that way when judging a crime.
How should we be considering the role of responsibility for our own individual actions and the inequality of opportunity that you talked about? None of us choose the family that we're born into. None of us choose the privileges that we have, the privileges that we don't have by who we are, right? And no doubt, to your point, that absolutely impacts the experience we have in this world, the opportunity that we have in this world. Of course, though, each of us are responsible for our own actions. So you're saying you take full responsibility for those actions. How do we make sense of that dynamic?
Yes, that's a really good question. So in taking responsibility for my actions, I'm empowering myself to change. And so that's my responsibility. I think what society's responsibility is to look beyond that and, yes, acknowledge that we need to hold people accountable, but also look into the circumstances that led up to whatever they did, and bring some understanding and, most importantly, care. Come at it with a care-first approach, if you will.
A care-first approach. I love that. Yeah, when we look at, I think oftentimes homelessness and a lot of other social problems in our world are looked at, and there's a confusion between the individual experience and the community, the community situation and the community outcomes, right? So when we look at one individual's experience, criminal justice, addiction, mental health, loss of job, all these things can play into that. But when we look at it as at a community level, and we see, for example, that in San Diego County, almost 30% of our unhoused people identify as Black or African American, compared to the larger population is only 4 to 5%. We see that at the community level, there's this huge inequality and discrepancy that no individual choice is the responsibility for at the community level. And I think you really just personalized that and shared that more eloquently than I've ever heard anyone share it through your own experience. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. That's one of the most valuable things that I have to give, and that others with lived experience in homelessness and being formerly incarcerated. So there's a value that we can bring to society, having that lived experience. And I think it's important to bring that all the way up to the level of lawmakers and legislators, because a lot of them don't have that lived experience.
So let's talk about that, because you got out, you went to right away. You went into college, Project Rebound. You graduated, and you're now also a member of the Homeless Experienced Advocacy Leadership Network, which has an acronym, HEAL. Share about the HEAL Network and what that is, and our listeners would love to learn more.
Yes. So the HEAL Network is a network of formerly unhoused, and what they do is they train us to tell our stories. And so by telling our stories, we're bringing a human aspect to these numbers, that lawmakers or researchers are looking at, and we're bringing a different lens of lived experience that they don't understand, because they've never been on the street and know what it's like not to have a place to use the bathroom, to be hungry, to have to beg, to not have a place to sleep, to be uncomfortable in the cold and rain and weather. Mm-hmm. So that's something that, by telling our stories, which the HEAL Network helps us refine and do, we're able to go to like city council and the board of supervisors and express our experience to them in a way that hopefully changes their hearts and minds to a way that's more compassionate and healing for our society.
You mentioned some examples of what it's like to be on the streets, the physical challenges, the emotional challenges that people in that situation face. What are some of the experiences that you've shared through HEAL or that you've heard others share that resonate and sometimes even surprise lawmakers and community members?
Well, there's a stigma to homelessness, and it's a drug addict, an alcoholic, a crazy person on the streets, just, causing havoc, making a mess, being a nuisance. And there is an element to that. I don't want to deny that is a problem and should be dealt with. And one way in dealing with that is housing and reform in some of our laws and how we take care of those people with mental health issues and substance abuse issues. Mm-hmm. But there's more to it than that. Like the stories I've heard are stories of mothers with children living under stairwells, just trying to survive. And it really puts people into a survival mechanism, a survival mode. And one of the fastest growing populations in the unhoused community is the elderly. And in San Diego, our housing prices, the cost of living is going up exponentially. Mm-hmm. And so what that's doing is that's putting pressure on people, especially with fixed incomes and people with health issues, which is primarily our elderly. And it puts them in a situation where they aren't able to afford the cost of living. And so that's when I feel that our community, and that goes to our city because through our tax dollars and our citizens, and also our communities, like our faith-based communities that do step in, like Interfaith and different churches and or nonprofit organizations as well.
Interfaith operates 75 different programs and services, and historically we're a poverty alleviation agency. We came out of fights against racism at the end of the 1970s and inequality and poverty where people didn't have food for their families, and seniors didn't have food and were choosing between food for their dog or food for themselves. And now we're often thought of as a homeless agency because so many people in poverty are now falling into homelessness. We've really had to increase so much of that work. A few of those 75 programs are focused on helping seniors. And I've been with Interfaith almost 20 years. And when I first joined us, we worked with seniors to help them be able to stay in their homes in a healthy way. Not like there was never a fear that they were going to be losing their homes, or very rare. It was like, hey, let's make your home safe. Let's install this grab bar. Let's help you with that leaky sink that you're not able to fix. Those problems are quaint now because almost every single person we work with is afraid they're about to lose their housing. They have lost their housing, or they're on the verge of losing their housing for the reasons you described. So I really appreciate you, Jason, being somebody who advocates, who shares your lived experience. But for our viewers who can see us on YouTube, you're not a senior, you're a young guy, right? So you bring your own, you understand the experience of others too.
Yes. Well, that's some good points. I am young and I am healthy, and I do have a sound mind, and I am able to work. I do have my traumas, I do have, that's come with my lived experience in incarceration and homelessness. And I have my mental health issues that I'm working through with PTSD and things like that. So there is still struggle. And even when a person can look like they're good.
Like they got it all together.
Yeah. And that goes for people that aren't even unhoused or have been incarcerated, So you never know what someone is going through. Um, yeah. So where were you going? What was that? What was the question leading up to
There
that?
was no question. We were just talking, and I am appreciating you for who you are, getting to know you. For our listeners, Jason and I, we met at City Hall last month. We really haven't had any discussion. We don't know each other, so we're just getting to connect here. And we wanted to. I mean, I'm excited for you to be on the show and asking what you wanted to be able to communicate today. You were all about wanting to talk about the work, wanting to talk about the advocacy, and so we were just talking about that seniors are the fastest growing population of people experiencing homelessness, and that you are addressing that through the HEAL network, through the advocacy of individuals with lived experience. And before we started recording, you were sharing that the HEAL network has been doing work with not one, not two, not three or four, but 5 different cities recently. Can you share a little bit more about that work?
Sure. Yes. So I'm on a subcommittee that's reporting and presenting to 5 different cities here in San Diego. That's La Mesa, National City, the City of San Diego, Chula Vista, and Carlsbad. And they've been coming to us and through HEAL to gain our experience as formerly unhoused lived experience advisors.
So those cities are coming to the HEAL network and seeking your input.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is also connected to the San Diego Housing Federation.
Okay.
I'd like to add that. And so, like, for example, like Chula Vista was really happy to have us not only asking them questions, but giving them solutions, giving them suggestions of how we could help, how they could help their city through the changing legislation.
What were some of those suggestions?
Well, the age-friendly, this is primarily an age-friendly research project.
Okay.
And so that's because I saw the need and wanted to become a champion for the age-friendly because I see how important it is.
Yeah.
And I believe that the cities want that too.
Well, and cities control or have a major influence on housing production. You know that from your experience with your family's business, your father's business, right? And so when we talk about the cost of housing, cities have an opportunity, and I'm sure you would agree. I would argue an absolute requirement to prioritize the creation of housing that is affordable.
Yes, affordable housing, and that can look like a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
There's different programs where, like with seniors, moving them in with each other.
Shared housing.
Housing, finding people that are compatible and can support each other. So it's not just a burden to taxpayers. We're not going to find a money-based solution that is just
going to solve the issue for everybody.
Right.
Yeah.
By just throwing money at it.
Yeah.
We're
not going to build our way out of it. We're not going to create enough deed income restricted affordable housing to get out of this issue. We need all those things, but
right. But we also need some creativity. And that's where people with lived experience can come in and be helpful, I believe, because let's just say that the unhoused are neurodivergent.
Okay.
They think different, you know?
Yeah.
So, and they're not, so their minds are kind of naturally not restrained by rules, let's say.
When you need that characteristic when you're trying to come up with these creative ideas, right?
Yeah, so it's a resource we can tap to get new ideas and be creative in how we find solutions to this problem.
So are there non-traditional ideas, creative solutions that you'd like to share with our listeners for them to consider and to be a part of helping advocate for, or just to think about?
Well, I could say that one thing I'm doing and involved in is through the arts.
Okay.
So by so I'm part of an organization called the Unhoused Collective, and we are building a network of people formerly unhoused, and we're giving them a chance to tell their stories, and we're building an archive of their stories, and so that lets them understand themselves and their own story, and it empowers them to be able to change their story and change the narrative. And so once they understand who they are and where they came from, they can do something about it, ideally, right? So it also gives them a chance to be creative and feel confident. And I think that's super important, because a lot of this comes from lack of confidence, trauma, which feeds that lack of confidence. And so for them to be able to, it's giving voice to the voiceless and power to the powerless. And it makes them feel good to have, one, to be heard, and two, to see that somebody cares enough to listen.
Well, the listeners of this podcast are on board. That's why they're listening to this podcast, I would expect. So where can they learn more about the San Diego Unhoused Collective and access some of this amazing art that's being created?
We have a website, unhousedcollective.com, .org.
Unhousedcollective.org.
Yes.
Okay.
And a website that's going to launch in a week or two called the San Diego Unhoused Collective on YouTube.
Nice. Okay, and we'll put links in the show notes to these as well. And then what kind of artwork? How are the stories being told?
Well, it's important that we let them tell their stories the way that they want to.
Yeah.
So we're not trying to tell them how to do it per se. We're just trying to help them tell their stories, and we believe that there's healing in that. We're also developing a play out of these stories. So it's a verbatim play. And so what that is...
What's a verbatim play?
Verbatim is taking the manuscripts and pulling out pieces of it. So it's word for word.
Okay. Of
their stories. And so we're telling a bigger story with these individual stories. And it's we want to do it, and it's also an experiential theater piece in which the audience gets involved in it a little bit. So,
and if our listeners are interested and want to experience the play, I imagine going on the website is a place to connect in.
Yes.
When do you have a date when you expect to be able to, when these performances are going to be happening, or what? Where's that in the development process?
We are still early in it, but we've got a fellowship through Columbia University.
No kidding.
And a program called INCITE. And so we're getting some advice through them. We've also partnered with a local production company called Blind Spot. And we're excited to have them on board. We've started doing weekly meetings, and we're starting to hash out, timelines and things like that. So our plan is to launch in November.
Okay, that's coming up. Yeah.
Yeah, this year. So yeah.
Well, let's stay in touch on it, because when it's ready to launch, we'd love to promote it and share and invite our community of people who care and are committed to helping people overcome and prevent homelessness. We'd love to share this with them.
Okay, yeah, absolutely.
Going back to the Unhoused Collective and the giving voice to the voiceless and power to the powerless, you shared about how it's important that people be able to share their stories in the way they want to. Mm-hmm. What are some examples of how people are sharing their stories?
How they are sharing their stories. So it's been important to me as an interviewer I do have the lived experience, so that's helpful to gain some trust. And I've been integrating myself back into that community. volunteering. I sing with the Voices of Our City Choir.
Awesome.
And so that helps me. That's a local San Diego homeless choir. So that's helps me gain some trust, and that's really something that's lacking amongst that community because
Sure.
they're living in fear so much.
Yeah.
You know,
Rightfully so. Based on their experiences.
Yes, and so it's really just coming in with the open mind and heart, and listening and asking questions, and not trying to, without judgment, not trying to tell them what to do or who to be or any of that. So, and that's just in coaxing their story out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so if our listeners check out Unhoused Collective at the website, will they be able to access some stories there?
Yes.
Great. Well, I mean, they're listening to a podcast about individuals sharing their stories with homelessness. So I think we have a great opportunity to send some folks your way and hopefully continue to raise awareness. The entire idea of this show is that in order to effectively address homelessness, we need an entire community engaged in understanding the problem in a more personal way. And so your sharing today is helping that for each person who's listening. And hopefully we can exponentially increase the impact by also introducing more people to the artwork and the storytelling that you're leading.
Yeah, that is the goal, awareness. And that's what inspired our play. So it's called Street Scene, SEEN. So my partner, Ken, he also is formerly unhoused. And there's a local festival called the WOW Festival here in San Diego.
The WOW Festival?
WOW Festival.
Okay.
It stands for Without Walls.
Okay.
And so it's theater. It's like open space theater.
Community, like theater in the community.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So what happened was he witnessed some of the homeless being moved or displaced out of their homes in order to have this productions. It was down by the Shell. So that kind of sparked in him, an awareness that these people aren't seen, that they need to be seen, and they have a right to even see something like that, like these plays, like be a part of the community.
Yeah. Like
not be just kicked out and set aside, and like you're not welcome, you're not good enough or whatever. So
and not putting up walls. I mean, the Without Walls movement is to bring theater into the community, and it's self-defeating to remove the community from that space.
Yes, absolutely. I love that. So in designing this play, we actually have been in talks with WOW, and we're going to premiere it outside of WOW in November, but we also want to participate in WOW in 2025. And yes, that's breaking down the walls, and it's also important to us that we have people who are formerly unhoused in the production of the play, and that it's something that they can see and be a part of as well.
Wow. Street Scene. I can't wait to experience that when it's ready. Jason, you are impressive in everything that you're doing through the Unhoused Collective, through HEAL. You also are a part of the Residents United Network, RUN. That's through the San Diego Housing Federation.
Yes.
And you have something coming up with that.
Yes. So they're similar to HEAL, except it's on a state level.
Okay.
So it's same kind of thing, like telling our stories, and our stories are bringing a human touch to legislators, and we will be going up to Sacramento in May and petitioning them, bringing awareness of of our needs.
One thing that you and I were talking about beforehand is that you were advocating for legislators having individuals on their staff who have lived experience. And I was sharing with you my observation that while I'm sure there are a number of staff on legislators, staff within legislators' teams who have lived homeless experience, I'm not aware of that in a significant way, like of a lot of people, or strategically legislators ensuring that they have that perspective. I'm sure it exists, and I'm just not aware of it. But I also think it probably reflects a need for that to be something that is given greater priority.
Yes, absolutely. That's something we're wanting to bring attention to, is the value in that. So I think as a society in America, we've all learned to value diversity, and we work towards that, and fairness and equality, and bringing each other up together, everybody bringing each other up together as a community. And so this is kind of a underrepresented population that we want to bring attention and awareness to. And yes, if I have like a call to action here,
Yeah.
it's
We always have a call to action. Go for it.
it's to specifically with our legislators, because they're the ones that are determining what's going on with this population, and have some control over it. And also some of these big nonprofits that are making money off of the problem, and there's also private corporations, as well. But for everybody who has anything to do with the topic of being unhoused, that they should have representation of the formerly unhoused as well, and be on the staff and have a say, have a voice, because we need that lived experience to be able to treat the problem and give us some solutions that they have an understanding of what can work for them.
At all levels, lived experience representation at all levels. And I think one thing that you've demonstrated today is that you utilize your lived experience in really powerful ways, in an interdisciplinary way, through artwork, through advocacy, and more. And you also expand upon your own personal experience. You've shared today about your own personal experience helping inform your empathy and understanding for seniors who have a very different experience, and that's really powerful. And I commend you for the work that you're doing, for the way that you're doing the work, and for the intelligence and the foresight that you do it with.
Yeah, well, people showed me that I was worth caring about, and that gave me a chance, or like a spark. It was helpful in me learning to care for myself, me learning to love myself when I didn't think I was worthy. Others thought I was worthy, and gave me a chance. And so yeah, that in turn has prompted me to do the same for others. So now I do know myself and know my story, and am working on a better story, a better future for my life. And now that I love myself, I'm able to help others love themselves too, by showing them that they are worthy.
Beautiful. Jason, it is an honor getting to know you and spend some time with you. I really appreciate who you are, what you're doing. To our listeners, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. The call to action, Jason spoke about the importance of people with lived experience and their perspectives in organizations and among influencing people, influencing homelessness. So legislators have an impact. Nonprofits have an impact. I'll kind of crystallize that for our listeners. For a call to action, We often say advocate for creating housing, advocate for creating pathways out of homelessness, whether it be shelter or any number of ways that people overcome that situation. I would say advocate for the nonprofits like Interfaith Community Services, for the local governments, for the state, other levels of government, to hear the voices, to engage the individuals with lived experience. So that could be people on the staff of a senator, of a council person, of a city staff. It could also be people doing the actual work. More and more of the individuals providing direct services at organizations like Interfaith do so as peer support specialists with lived experience, with training to support them to understand and professionalize how that experience can help others. So I would ask our listeners to, for the organizations that you're a part of, for the organizations that you support, ask how lived experience is a part of that work. It should be at a nonprofit level, represented on the board of directors. It should be a part of the employees doing the work. It should certainly be a part of how we do this at all levels. So, Jason, thank you for joining us. Is there anything else that you want to share with our listeners? Anything else that you want to speak to today?
Go see Street Scene when it comes out.
Yeah. Street Scene. Check out unhousedcollective.org. Street Scene in November, and then it'll be, I'm sure, at Without Walls in 2025. Yeah, I can't wait.
Yeah. And I would also say get involved. Be a part of your community. You don't have to be unhoused to support the unhoused. And there's other ways, like if you feel called, like you can go as well. But I think it's important that we have a community of activism and support for each other, and helping each other out.
Well said. Jason, thank you for being an activist. Thank you for being an artist. Thank you for joining us today. And to our listeners, appreciate you spending the time with us. And we'll see you at Street Scene in November.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Greg.
Yep.